Okay, so the Eagles' 2024 schedule, along with all 31 other teams, has officially been released, and it's very, very interesting, as there's both plenty of good and also a decent amount of bad, but when you break it all down, this schedule really presents as a massive opportunity for the Eagles to potentially go on a Super Bowl run, assuming they manage the trials and tribulations of the year correctly. Now, I'm going to explain exactly why in this video today, so let's not waste any time, and let's get straight into it. Alright, so before we get into the schedule and dive into it fully, I want to go over just a couple things involving some of the rookies first, as yesterday, Trotter Jr. and Dylan McMahon both officially signed their contracts, and that now makes 7 of the 9 Eagles draft picks that have officially signed their contracts, so that's definitely nice to just get these rookie signings out of the way kind of early in the offseason. Now that leaves the 2 most exciting rookies of the draft class in Quinyon Mitchell and DeJean as the only 2 who have yet to sign, so I'm sure those will be coming soon, but as of now, 7 of the 9 guys are signed, so that's definitely good. But now after going over that, let's get into the schedule. Starting with the not so exciting preseason schedule, as the Birds will face the Ravens first, followed by the Patriots, and then very interestingly, the Minnesota Vikings. And I say that's interesting because I feel like the Birds always kind of play the same few teams every preseason, or at least the same handful of teams, but the Vikings are a very interesting one because, at least in my time watching the Birds, I cannot remember a time where they played the Vikings in the preseason, so it's just kind of different, but at the same time, I mean, it's preseason, so who really cares that much? But we might actually get to have an early look at JJ McCarthy, so that'll be fun, and hopefully the Birds manage the preseason the right way. Maybe the starters will get a few reps unlike last year, and also maybe we'll find some nice hidden gems that show out in those games. But now, moving on to the regular season, which is really what everybody cares about. We start out in week 1 where the Eagles of course are going to face the Green Bay Packers in Brazil on Friday night, and it's going to be really exciting. I mean, you got 2 of the top younger quarterbacks in the NFC and just the league in Jalen Hurts and Jordan Love going up against each other, and really these are 2 teams that have high expectations for this season and have potential to maybe even see each other later down the line in the playoffs, so this is certainly going to be a very interesting and exciting game to open the year. Obviously it's week 1, so neither of the teams are going to be established yet, and we won't quite know what to expect from this matchup, but it's certainly going to be a must watch, and also a tough test for the Birds to start the year on international grounds. And it's also worth noting that the one bad thing about this matchup is it's a home game for the Eagles, so it's going to be one less game in the link, but hopefully that doesn't end up hurting the Birds too bad down the line. But then in week 2, the Eagles are actually going to have their home opener on Monday night versus the Falcons, making this the 3rd straight year that the Eagles will have their first home game against Kirk Cousins in primetime. And the Falcons are actually an interesting matchup as well because they're a young, talented team, and with the addition of Kirk Cousins and others as well, they certainly have expectations for this season. But at the same time, the Birds have owned Kirk the past few years, and they're certainly the better team on paper, so this should be a very winnable game for them, but also just an interesting and fun primetime matchup nonetheless. Now moving on to week 3, the Eagles will head to New Orleans to face Derek Carr, the Saints, and that tough defense of theirs, and this is going to be another fun watch, as the Saints are kind of an up and down team, and they could present a tough matchup if the Eagles are not careful. I mean, just look at the last time these teams played, albeit with Gardner-Minshew as the quarterback as an example. Now looking ahead to week 4, the Eagles will be on the road again, this time for a playoff rematch with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where the Birds will be looking for a measure of revenge after what happened in Tampa back in January, and the Bucs again are going to be a team with some form of expectations. After they did make it to the divisional round last year and almost went to the NFC Championship game. Plus, the Bucs have kind of had the Eagles' number in recent years outside of last year's week 3 matchup, so this again will be somewhat of an early test for the Birds, but definitely again a very winnable matchup. But then we get to week 5 in the Eagles bye week in what is probably the worst thing about the entire schedule. And that's simply because it's just so early into the year. I mean, bye weeks are beneficial because they give the team a chance to get some rest and also get healthy, but with them having it so early in the season, the Eagles will have only played 4 games prior, so not only is the rest not really needed so much at this point, but also the Birds theoretically hopefully won't be dealing with too many injuries, so it's not going to be helpful in letting a ton of guys get healthy either. And then also coming off the bye week, the Eagles got to play 13 straight games before the end of the regular season, so that's definitely not ideal. But now coming off the bye week in week 6, the Eagles will be at home to face the Browns in what is yet again a presumably kind of tough matchup. I mean, the Browns have a great defense, they should be getting Nick Chubb back, and they were also a pretty good team last year that made it to the playoffs, so it's yet another early season test for the Birds, but like all the others, the Eagles should be the better team. They at least are on paper, and there's a good chance that they come away with the win there. Now in week 7, the Eagles will be on the road again to face the Giants in MetLife, and this is a fun game because not only is it the first divisional matchup of the season, but it's also going to be Saquon Barkley's first chance to get back at his old team, so I'm sure all Birds fans are hoping for a huge game from Barkley in this one, and of course an Eagles win over their hated rivals. And with the Giants pretty much in disarray, they theoretically should not have very much of an issue in this game, but you never really know with the history between these two teams because anything can happen. But now in week 8, the Eagles start what is a pretty tough 6-week stretch, as they go on the road to face what should be one of the AFC's top teams in the Cincinnati Bengals, as after a rough start last year and then the devastation of Joe Burrow's season-ending torn wrist ligament, the Bengals Eagles should be in line for a bounce back with Burrow returning, so this will be yet again another very fun matchup to watch. Jalen Hurts versus Joe Burrow is going to be awesome. It is certainly going to be a huge game. But now in week 9, the Eagles have their first of a couple Sunday night games, this one at home versus Doug Peterson and the Jacksonville Jaguars, and this will be a fun primetime matchup versus Trevor Lawrence, and of course, the only Super Bowl winning head coach in Eagles history in Doug Peterson. I mean, the Jags certainly could be a good team this year, so this could be another somewhat tough game depending on how the Jags are looking at this point, but again, it's one that the Eagles should win, just like the last time these two teams played back in October of 2022. And then the Eagles get to week 10, where they're going to have their first game of the season against their arch rivals, as they're going to head to Jerry World to face the hated Dallas Cowboys, and you know, everyone knows that this is a huge matchup. It's Eagles-Cowboys, arguably the best rivalry in the NFL, and everyone knows what's at stake and how much these two teams hate each other. Now, they've been splitting their matchups the last few years, but hopefully this year the Birds can go for the sweep and hopefully get this one in Dallas for the first time since 2017. Then in week 11, the Eagles will be back at home to take on another division rival, this one being the Washington Commanders, and we'll get to see the new quarterback to the division in rookie Jaden Daniels for the first time, so it'll be interesting to see where this team is. I mean, they could be trash like last year, or who knows, maybe the rookie leads them to a better start than we expect, and that combined with the fact that the Commanders have actually given the Eagles some trouble recently for whatever reason, could lead to a close game. That or the Commies just end up sucking again. I mean, the defense is still definitely terrible, so in that case, the Eagles should just blow them out, and hopefully that's what happens. But now moving on to week 12, the Eagles will head back on the road to face the Rams in prime time on Sunday night, and the Eagles have actually done pretty well against the Rams in recent years. They obviously beat them in LA last year, but the Rams, again, they're definitely no slouch, just like a lot of these other teams that are on the schedule, but also similarly to the other teams, the Eagles should theoretically be better than them, so hopefully they handle business here. Now we head to week 13, where the Eagles will cap off their rough 6-game stretch with what I think is probably their toughest game of the year, as they'll head on the road to face the AFC's runner-up from last year in the Baltimore Ravens. And this is definitely going to be a matchup with a ton of headlines. I mean, you got Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, and other talented players. It's going to be super fun and super exciting, and it's a game that could really show us just how good these two teams are as we get later into the season. But this game against the Ravens also does start a 6-week stretch that is very favorable for the Eagles. And the main reason the title of this video says that the schedule may set them up for a Super Bowl run or gives them a massive opportunity or whatever I end up titling it, that's because this game starts a 6-week period where the Eagles do not have to get on a plane to travel. As in week 14, they play the lowly Panthers at home in a game that they should easily win, just assuming they handle business. Then in week 15, they stay at home and face the Steelers, which maybe could be a decent team. I mean, we know that Mike Tomlin has never been below 500, but the Steelers don't exactly scare me, and it is at home, so it's definitely a very winnable game for the Birds. Then they go on the road to face the Commanders, and again, this could be interesting, but most likely it's a win for the Eagles. And then in week 17, they have their biggest game of the year against the Cowboys at home, and this is one that'll definitely be a very tough game. I mean, it's going to have playoff implications, no doubt, and it could potentially even decide the division depending on how both teams look. So it's going to be a huge game to say the least, but also one that the Birds could very well win, as the last few seasons they have been able to beat Dallas at home. And then they end off the season at home again versus the Giants, which hopefully at that point the Eagles are then resting their starters because maybe they've clinched the 1 seed, but if not, it's another game that the Birds should definitely win. And another reason that this end-of-season stretch was actually so favorable is because the Birds have 4 of their last 5 games at home, so that's a perfect way to end the year in my opinion. And there's some other good things to talk about with the schedule. I mean, for one, after going from the league's toughest strength of schedule last year, the Birds have the 21st ranked schedule this season, so that's definitely nice. They also have 6 1 p.m. games, which was definitely needed after only having, I think, 2 last year. But the reason I say that the Eagles are set up for a Super Bowl run is because their late schedule, in which they do not have to get on a plane for 6 weeks, they also have 4 of their last 5 games at home, and it's against mainly easier opponents, will allow the Eagles to rest up a little bit by not having to travel so much, and they can theoretically get hot down the stretch with all these easier opponents as opposed to last year's collapse. Because once they get to this point, if the Eagles have already handled business earlier in the season like they should have, then they could potentially be looking at maybe a bye if they got the number 1 seed, or at least 1 home playoff game, or even 2, which would mean that they do not have to get on a plane for a total of 7 to 9 weeks in a row, depending on what seed they end up having. So I'm not making any guarantees or anything like that, but all I'm saying is if the Eagles handle business early and then they heat up towards the end, the Birds are certainly in prime position to make a Super Bowl run. Now, as far as their actual record, I'm going to say the Birds finish at around 12-5 or 13-4. But you guys can let me know your record predictions down in the comments. And also, I'm going to be doing a full record prediction going game by game in a short very soon. And also, I'm just going to be covering the Eagles throughout the entire year and continue to do that for years to come. So if you don't want to miss any of that, make sure you subscribe, and also really importantly, turn on notifications so you're notified instantly when one of these videos is uploaded. And also, while you're at it, make sure you drop a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you want to watch another Eagles video, you can check this one out right here. Now, with all that being said, that's pretty much all I got for this one, guys. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.